What if I told you that the loneliness you've been feeling lately isn't a sign that you're failing, but a sign that you're ascending? What if that uncomfortable gap between you and the people you once called your peers is actually a mandatory filtering process? What if the reason you no longer fit in with the crowd isn't because you've lost your way, but because you finally found a path that the many are too afraid to walk? You felt it, haven't you? That subtle, heavy distance that appears in a crowded room. You are physically present, you are nodding, you are playing the part, but internally, you are miles away. You look at the people around you, their trivial gossip, their constant complaints, their desperate chase for weekend distractions, and it suddenly feels like a foreign language. For a long time, you probably called this a defect. You wondered why you couldn't just be normal, why you couldn't find satisfaction in the noise like everyone else. You felt like an outsider looking through a glass wall at a world that seemed to be having a party you weren't invited to. But if you are here, at the Stoic threshold, it is because you are starting to realize a terrifying and beautiful truth. The higher you climb the mountain of self-mastery, the thinner the air becomes. And the thinner the air, the fewer people you will find there. The world teaches us that being alone is a punishment. From the moment we are born, we are conditioned to believe that belonging is the ultimate safety. We are told to find our tribe, to stay in line, and to measure our success by the number of hands we can reach out and touch. We are taught that the person who walks alone must be broken, arrogant, or lost. But the Stoics understood a secret that the modern world has been trained to forget. The crowd is where character goes to die. Seneca, the great Stoic advisor to emperors, once wrote, "I never come back home with the same character I went out with." He understood that every time we immerse ourselves in the many, we leak a little bit of our soul. We negotiate our values just to avoid friction. We mute our intensity because it makes others feel small. We trade our sharp edges for a roundness that allows us to roll along with the masses. The top 1%, not just in wealth, but in character, in discipline, and in mental sovereignty, know that greatness is a solo sport. They understand that you cannot build an unshakable mind while you are constantly checking to see if the group approves of your blueprints. Solitude is not a prison. It is a workshop. It is the only place where the noise of the many is finally replaced by the voice of the logos, the rational truth of your own soul. Most people cannot stand to be alone because they cannot stand the person they're alone with. They need the television, the scroll, and the constant chatter of others to drown out the terrifying silence of their own unformed character. They use the crowd as a sedative. But a Stoic uses solitude as a furnace. They know that an unshakable mind is not built in the middle of a celebration. It is forged in the quiet hours when no one is watching. It is built in the dark room of self-examination. It is developed when you realize that the only audience that matters is the man you were yesterday and the man you intend to be tomorrow. When you see the top 1% of humans, those who are fit, disciplined, and in total control of their emotional state, understand that they did not get there by being agreeable. They got there by being willing to walk away. They got there by deciding that the approval of 1,000 fools is worth less than the respect of their own reflection. This reflection is not here to tell you how to be more social. It is here to validate the instinct you've been feeling to pull back. It is here to show you that the ache of being different is actually the growing pains of your own authority. We are going to deconstruct the 10 elite rules of the solo path. We are going to look at why your absence is often more powerful than your presence, and how to turn your isolation into an unassailable fortress of strength. If you feel like you are walking alone right now, look around. You aren't lost. You are just ahead of the pack. The path to the 1% does not have a paved road. It has a threshold. and today we step across it. Stop apologizing for your distance. Stop explaining your silence, and stop waiting for the crowd to catch up. Greatness has always been a lonely destination. Let us look at the rules that make that journey the best decision you will ever make. We begin with the first trial. Principle 1. The mirage of the crowd. The first trial of the solo path is the realization that the crowd is a lie disguised as a sanctuary. Most people live in a state of social hypnosis. They believe that if everyone is doing something, it must be correct. They find safety in numbers, like a herd of deer on an open plain, telling themselves that as long as they are with the many, they cannot be wrong. But the Stoic looks at the crowd and sees a mirage. Seneca warned us, the crowd is proof of the worst. He understood that when people gather in large numbers without a guiding principle of reason, the collective intelligence drops to the level of the most reactive person in the group. The top 1% understand that the majority is not going where they want to go. If you want results that the 99% do not have, you must stop doing what the 99% are doing. You must realize that belonging is often just a high price you pay for mediocrity. When you are with the crowd, you are playing a game of consensus. When you are alone, you are playing a game of truth. Walking alone is the only way to verify if your thoughts are actually yours, or if you have simply been a radio station playing other people's songs for your entire life. Principle 2. Self-sufficiency as supreme wealth. The second trial of the elite path is the mastery of autarkeia, the Stoic concept of self-sufficiency. Most people are emotional beggars. They move through the world with an invisible tin cup in their hands, asking everyone they meet for a coin of validation. They need a like to feel attractive. They need a well done to feel competent. They need an I agree to feel certain. Without these external deposits, their self-worth goes bankrupt. The top 1% are not beggars. They are owners. They have realized that the only wealth that cannot be stolen is the ability to be satisfied with one's own company. Epictetus taught that he is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. When you master solitude, you break the addiction to external feedback. You stop leaking power. True self-sufficiency means that your mood is not a hostage to someone else's opinion. It means you can work for months in the dark without a single person noticing, because the work itself is the reward. When you no longer need the world to tell you that you matter, the world loses its grip on you. Principle 3. Character is forged in the dark. The third trial is the understanding that your true self is what remains when the lights go out and the audience leaves. The modern world is obsessed with public virtue. People perform their stoicism for a camera. They want the glory of the warrior without the dirt of the arena. But a Stoic knows that character is not a performance. It is a secret. The top 1% understand that the most important work happens when no one is watching. It is the workout at 5 a.m., the book read instead of scrolling, the boundary held when it would be easier to give in. If your discipline depends on being seen, it is not discipline, it is marketing. The solo path is the ultimate training ground because it removes the incentive of applause. In solitude, you are left with the raw materials of your own soul. The 1% walk alone because they know that the inner citadel is built brick by brick in the dark. By the time they emerge into the light, their character is already set in stone. Once you have survived the internal trials of solitude, you must learn how to relate to the world from your new position of strength. To remain in the top 1%, you cannot allow the 99% to drag you back down. You must apply the Stoic filter. Principle 4. Respect is a product of distance. The fourth principle of the elite is a paradox. Your absence often creates more authority than your presence. Most people are terrified of being forgotten. They believe that to be respected, they must be available. They respond to every message instantly. They attend every gathering and they explain themselves to everyone who asks. They believe that visibility equals value. But the Stoics and the high performers who follow them understand the law of scarcity. When you are always available, you are a commodity. When you are rarely seen, you are a landmark. The top 1% do not chase respect. They command it through their distance. By walking alone, you communicate that your time is governed by your own mission, not by other people's boredom. You stop being a background character in other people's lives and start being the sovereign of your own. When you finally do speak, or when you finally do appear, your words carry weight because they are rare. You have learned that intimacy is earned, but respect is maintained through boundaries. Principle 5. Guarding the threshold of the mind. The fifth principle is the relentless defense of your inner world. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, your mind will take the shape of what you frequently hold in thought. Most people have no filter. They allow the chaos of the news, the drama of their social circle, and the toxic opinions of strangers to flood their minds daily. They wonder why they feel anxious and scattered, not realizing they have left the door to their citadel wide open. The 1% are the gatekeepers of their own attention. They understand that every person they let into their inner circle and every conversation they engage in is a seed planted in the soil of their character. If you want to grow into a colossus, you cannot allow weeds to take root. Walking alone allows you to see who truly deserves a seat at your table. It gives you the clarity to realize that most friendships are actually just shared distractions. Stoic precision requires you to be ruthless with your threshold. It is better to have no one in your life than to have people who require you to be a smaller, weaker version of yourself just to keep them comfortable. Principle 6. The eloquence of silence. The sixth principle is the refusal to explain. One of the greatest leaks of mental energy is the urge to justify your path to people who aren't walking it. When you decide to wake up early, to save your money, or to distance yourself from the crowd, people will ask, why? They will project their own insecurities onto your ambition. They will call you cold, boring, or stuck up. The 99% feel the need to defend themselves. They try to convince the crowd that their choices are valid. They negotiate for understanding. The top 1% do not explain. They allow themselves to be misunderstood. A Stoic knows that patterns do not need subtitles. If your life is a reflection of your values, your actions are the only explanation required. When you stop explaining your silence becomes your superpower. It creates an aura of mystery and strength that the crowd cannot penetrate. You realize that you do not owe the world a map of your journey. You simply walk it. Let them wonder. Let them judge. Their confusion is the proof that you are finally moving in the right direction. Stop. Look up. Imagine for a moment that you are standing on the surface of a silent moon, looking back at the earth. From that distance, every crowd you've ever tried to fit into, every person whose approval you've ever chased, and every noise that has ever distracted you, vanishes into a tiny, silent, blue dot. The universe is not a social club. It is a vast, indifferent expanse of light and shadow that has been operating in perfect, silent order for billions of years before you arrived, and it will continue for billions more after you are gone. The Stoics called this the cosmic perspective. We spend so much of our lives terrified of being alone, yet we ignore the most fundamental reality of our existence. Solitude is the only constant. You were born alone. Even if there were people in the room, the transition into this world was a solo journey. You will die alone. Regardless of who is holding your hand, the crossing into the silence is yours and yours alone. Every thought you have ever had, every pain you have ever felt, and every decision you have ever made has occurred within the private, walled garden of your own mind. We are, by design, singular entities. So why do we spend our best years trying to pretend otherwise? Why do we feel broken when the world leaves us to ourselves, when being to ourselves is actually our most natural state? The top 1% are not people who have conquered loneliness. They are people who have befriended the void. They have realized that the threshold of true power is only crossed when you stop using other people as a buffer between you and reality. Most people are crowd-dependent because they are afraid of what they will find if they sit in a dark room for an hour with nothing but their own character. They are afraid that the person inside is empty or weak or unformed. But the Stoic knows that the void is not empty. It is a mirror. When you strip away the noise, you finally see what is left. And what is left is the Logos, the spark of universal reason that lives inside you. If you can be at peace with that spark, if you can stand on that silent moon and feel perfectly whole without a single witness to your existence, then you have reached the summit of human freedom. At that point, you no longer need anyone. And ironically, that is when you become most valuable to everyone. Walking alone is not a rejection of humanity. It is a rejection of the illusions that keep humanity weak. It is the realization that your character is not a group project. It is a private monument. As we move into the final principles of the elite path, do not look for ways to fix your isolation. Look for ways to deepen it. Look for the rules that turn your solitude into a sanctuary that no one, no matter how loud or how powerful, can ever invade. The crowd is a temporary distraction. Your soul is an eternal responsibility. Let us return to the path. Let us look at the elite standard. The trials are behind you. The perspective has shifted. Now we enter the final ascent. This is where the gap between the 99% and the 1% becomes an unbridgeable chasm. To walk this part of the path, you must adopt a set of standards that the world will call extreme. But to a Stoic, these are simply the requirements of a life well lived. Principle 7. Act without an audience. The seventh principle of the elite is the mastery of invisible work. We live in an era of staged discipline. People don't just go to the gym, they broadcast it. They don't just read a book, they post a photo of the cover. They have turned their personal growth into a social media performance. This is the ultimate leak of power. When you perform your discipline for an audience, you are no longer acting for the sake of character. You are acting for the sake of applause. And if the applause stops, the discipline usually stops with it. The top 1% operate in the dark room. They understand that character is what you do when you are absolutely certain that no one will ever find out. Principle 8. The burden of higher standards. The eighth principle is the acceptance of the weight of the standard. Most people's rules for themselves are dictated by average. They look around and see what is normal, and they aim just slightly above it. They eat what everyone eats. They work how everyone works. And they complain about what everyone complains about. They want the life of the 1% while holding the standards of the 99%. Stoicism is the philosophy of the high standard. It requires you to be your own most ruthless judge. The top 1% walk alone because their rules for themselves are so high that very few people can keep them company. While the crowd seeks comfort, the Stoic seeks effective hardship. While the crowd seeks to minimize effort, the Stoic seeks to maximize virtue. Walking alone allows you to hold these standards without the gravity of mediocrity pulling you down. When you are surrounded by people who have low standards, your own discipline feels weird or too much. They will tell you to relax, to take it easy, or that you work too hard. The 1% understand that relaxing into the standards of others is a slow form of self-sabotage. They embrace the loneliness of the standard. They would rather be alone with their discipline than accepted with their weakness. They have realized that the threshold of greatness is paved with the things that ordinary people find too difficult. Principle 9. Detachment as command. The 9th principle is the sovereignty of the exit. One of the greatest signs of weakness is the inability to walk away. People stay in toxic jobs, stagnant relationships, and soul-crushing environments because they are afraid of the silence that follows. They are terrified of being disconnected. This fear makes them easy to manipulate and impossible to respect. The top 1% are the most powerful people in any room because they are the most detached. Stoicism teaches that nothing external is essential to your happiness. If you can walk alone and be perfectly content, you have removed the world's primary leverage over you. You are no longer buyable. You're no longer movable. When you master solitude, your yes carries weight because people know you are perfectly comfortable saying no. Your presence is valued because they know you have the strength to provide your own absence. The ability to walk alone is the ultimate negotiation tool. Whether in business, in love, or in social status, the person who needs the least has the most power. Detachment is not coldness, it is command. It is the quiet authority that says, I am here by choice, not by need. And I can leave the moment my values are compromised. This is the superpower of the threshold. Once you realize you don't need the crowd starts trying to find a way into your circle. Principle 10. Walking alone to lead others. The 10th and final principle is the paradox of leadership. Many people believe that walking alone means becoming a hermit, disconnected from the world. But the historical truth of Stoicism is the opposite. The men who walked alone, Marcus Aurelius, Cato the Younger, Seneca, were the most influential leaders of their time. The top 1% walk alone so that they can eventually lead. You cannot lead a crowd if you are part of it. You cannot guide people to a place you haven't been yourself. Most leaders are just followers with a louder voice. They are still ruled by the same fears and desires as the group they are leading. A Stoic leader is different. He has spent time in the wilderness of his own mind. He has faced the void and befriended it. He has built an inner citadel that is independent of the world's praise or blame. Because he has mastered solitude, he can step back into the crowd and remain unshaken. The 1% walk alone to find their own center. They do the hard work of self-correction so that when the world enters a crisis, they can be the rock that the waves break against. People are drawn to the person who is comfortable in silence because most people are terrified of it. They sense your solo strength, and they want it for themselves. Walking alone is not the end of the journey, it is the initiation. You go into the silence to find your power, and you return to the world to use it. You walk alone until your character is so dense, so chiseled, and so solid that the world has no choice but to adjust itself to your presence. The path we have walked today is not a comfortable one. It was never meant to be. The top 1% do not inhabit a world of easy answers and constant company. They inhabit a world of deliberate focus. If you have stayed until this moment, it is because you have finally stopped viewing your solitude as a wound. You have begun to see it as a weapon. Walking alone does not mean you hate people. It means you love truth more than you fear rejection. It means you have realized that your soul is the only thing you truly own, and you have decided to stop renting it out to the highest bidder of social approval. Stoicism is the art of returning home to yourself. It is the realization that the threshold you've been looking for isn't out there in the crowd, in the promotion, or in the validation of others. It is right here, in the quiet, unblinking center of your own mind. As you move back into the world tomorrow, do not feel the need to announce your new strength. Do not explain your distance to those who cannot understand your mission. Simply continue. When the crowd calls for your attention, remain selective. When the noise demands a reaction, choose silence. When the path feels lonely, remember the altitude. You are becoming something dense, something chiseled, something sovereign. You are building an inner citadel that the world did not give you, and therefore the world cannot take away. This journey of self-governance is a lifelong practice. It is a quiet decision you will have to make every morning when you wake up and every evening before you sleep. If this way of thinking has steadied something in you today, if you feel a little less lost and a lot more found in your own company, then stay close to these reminders. We invite you to join us here at the Stoic Threshold, not because we have all the answers, but because we are all walking this same narrow path toward the 1%. If you haven't yet, subscribe to this space. It is your anchor. It is your consistent reminder to return to the Logos when the world tries to pull you away. Before you go, I want you to leave a signal, not for me and not for an algorithm, but for your own subconscious mind to hear. Write this quietly in the comments. I choose the solo path. Let it be your digital oath, a marker of the day you stopped waiting for a crowd and started leading yourself. Go back into the world now. Speak less, observe more, and walk your path with the quiet authority of a man who has already won the war inside his own mind. Step across the threshold and continue.